Greetings. My name is Dr. Wadell Brooks Sr., your host, and this is Community Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special person this evening. It's a person that you should know. Attorney Lonnie M. Randolph, attorney at law, East Chicago, Indiana. He's also licensed in Illinois, formerly assistant state's attorney in Lake County, Illinois. Good evening, Attorney Randolph.
Good evening, Dr. Brooks. It's a real pleasure seeing and talking to you too. I mean, you are, I often talk about you, but you don't know that, but I often talk about you, nothing but positive things. And I miss the time I was up there and everything. And sometimes, I have regrets, but that's life. Life is tough. One thing about life, you think about it and you take it for granted, and then after you go through some experiences and some years going on you, then you realize, hey, there's some choices that you should have made differently if you had to do it all over again. And I think not being up there was one of the choices that I think I might have made differently.
Well, let's talk about that. Do you remember Edwin Ford? He and I went to Dennis Ryan's office and told him something is wrong, Attorney Ryan. We have prosecutors here, but they're not the same as the one you're prosecuting.
Yep.
Something be done about that. And he said, well, if you find me one, I'll hire them. Okay. So I took him at his word, but God works in mysterious ways, because my job sent me down to Chicago to attend the luncheon at the Leadership Council for Metropolitan Open Communities. Now, Leadership Council is one of the first open housing organizations in the United States. It's founded in December 6, 1966, following a number of open housing actions by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Well, that's just a little dialogue, but we were sitting at the same table at the luncheon, and I found out that you had just graduated, about to graduate from John Marshall Law School.
Yep.
And I say, wow, this is an opportunity.
Yeah.
So now this is my tale. Now you may have a different story, because my wife told me that how we met. We met. I told one story about it. She told another one.
We always got our. It's just the facts. When you have the facts, and you got more than one person, each one had a different interpretation of what the facts might be, which is why we have law and judges.
Okay, right. So we talked at the table, and I invited you to come up to Lake County.
Yeah,
and
sure did.
You accepted to come up and be interviewed, and Dennis Bryan was true to his word. He hired you around the spot, right?
Yep.
Now,
And
this while story may change. You were commuting from Lake County to East Chicago, Indiana, right?
Right. I was commuting from Chicago. Really, I was living at that time on the south side of Chicago.
Okay.
And I was a senior in law school, ready to graduate at the time you and I met. I was a senior. And then, matter of fact,
Story would be different, yeah.
yeah, well, it's about the same, because
Okay.
we were talking. Wife was saying, well, now, when you graduate, you got to find a job because, we behind on these bills. So find one quick.
Okay.
And so when you and I met, I think Mr. Crusoe, Frank Willis Crusoe, Attorney Crusoe, was the general counsel for the Leadership Council. And he and I mentioned him. Matter of fact, the job was on my mind, and it seemed like it just dropped in my lap when you popped up. I said, okay, I'll take it. But anyway, you invited me up there, and I met Mr. Ryan, and one thing led to another, and then he made me the offer, and I was happy to accept it. And it was the first job I had as a lawyer and everything. And being an assistant state's attorney, and it was a big thing with me at that point there. But but that's pretty much what happened with that and everything.
Boy, this is fun. And I was thinking, this is about the second or third time we have seen each other since 1978, right? That's when you
Yeah,
graduated in 1978.
it's been a while. It's been a while.
This is,
And it shows the kind of positive effect that you've had on me. All those years we hadn't seen each other, but yet from time to time I'm still thinking about you and always ask about you. I've met a couple people from that area who have asked about you. More recent one who's been a while since I spoke with her was Marilyn McLemore.
yeah,
Marilyn McLemore. That
the
was right, McElroy. And I had asked her about you and everything. And I haven't seen her in a while now. I think the last time you and I spoke, not too long ago, you indicated that she was teaching somewhere in Chicago at one of the schools or something. I don't know. But anyway, it's been a while. But yeah, but that shows you the kind of effect that you had on me, even since when you talk about the time period.
Mhm.
It's been a time since that time. Right? But when you look at it, you say, well, dang, how could you remember someone going back that? Well, I did, because that's the kind of positive effect that you had on me at that time.
You know, you mentioned Attorney Marilyn McElroy. She graduated from Northwestern University.
Okay.
And she was the first Black female to be hired by the State Attorney's Office. And the person that hired her was Fred Foreman. And I think you know Fred Foreman.
Yeah. Fred and I became pretty good social. Well, we weren't real good friends, but we're friends, but we weren't like running friends, anything like that. But Fred made an impression on me too. And Fred made an impression this way. I was an athlete in high school and college and everything. Wasn't good enough to play the pros and all that. But we had an intramural team on the state's attorney's office there. I think I was the first African American that had hired there at that time. And then so Fred was on a basketball team. Matter of fact, he was an opposition team. So we had two teams, and we played at one of the local high schools. And I guess it was a traditional intramural game they have every year. And Fred was a center on another team. And I thought we were going to run all over the place and everything, because I thought we had the better team, especially I was on the team, that kind of stuff. Okay. But Fred turns out to be a pretty good ball player. I mean, he was a pretty good basketball player. And then that's when I found out he had played a little in high school and everything. But Fred was pretty good. And so instantly that caught my eye. And after that, we got to talking from time to time. And then we became associates at that point, me working there. And then after I left there, and I don't know whether I mentioned this to you or not, years after I left there, I had a case as a private attorney in Chicago. And at that point, I had conversed with Fred on the phone about something in the past. And I said, next time I come to Chicago, I'm going to stop by and holler at you and see you and say hello to you. And on this occasion, I did. And I can't recall the name of the firm, but it was like Fort Knox. You had to get in there. But turns out Fred was one of the associate partners with this large law firm that was a firm that settled the tobacco lawsuit against the tobacco companies at that time. It was a multi-billion-dollar deal. And then after that, I guess Fred was in a different cloud at that point. He's a different level. But that's the last time I actually saw Fred. And it turns out the communication with Fred developed after I left there some years, because one of the individuals in Lake County, Indiana, the government complex we have, was the manager of the building and maintenance manager. His name is John. What was John's last name? Mullins, John Mullins. Turns out John Mullins and Fred had went to school together, I guess college or something, and Fred was one of his best friends. One day I mentioned Waukegan. He found out I was that I spent some time up there, and that's when he asked for Fred. Then he and I became real good friends. And that's how the hookup with Fred came up, because I think he was meeting with Fred sometime after that, and he told Fred about me, and I guess either Fred called me after that or I called him, and that's how we recommunicated and everything. And that's how I ended up going and stopping and seeing him in Chicago when I had the case over there. I'm talking too much. Let me go. That's enough.
Your program. I haven't seen you since '78, so we had a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah.
But Fred was well, a great friend of mine too, because he told me, like Dennis Ryan did, find me one and I will hire them. That's after you left. So
Okay.
Mary McElroy became the first, well, African American female
Okay.
district attorney's office, you know.
Very good.
Now,
Good.
since that time, there's been very few blacks in the state's attorney's office. And I'm wondering, though, why, I can't figure out why there's such a, uh, I don't know, lack of enthusiasm for blacks to come to Lake County, or we're just not reaching out.
Well, yeah, the reaching out might have something to do with it. Well, I think it does have something to do with it, even though I have not been back up in there in a while. But reaching out is always a key factor when it comes to recruiting. But one of the key things about me when I was there, I was so excited about getting a position. I didn't think about anything else. But then I started looking at the pay scale. So I think if in fact there was an attraction, if you increase the pay scale a little bit, that might be an attractive factor for a young attorney coming out of law school to take a look at. And by taking a look at it, then that reaching out factor could have an effect as well. And so those two factors I think will be a key in recruiting there and everything. Because like I indicated to you the last time we spoke, and using hindsight, I think I might have stayed. But one of the factors that was a couple factors really. Well, actually three factors. The main factor in terms of that was that my wife, she was the main factor because she was a teacher in the Chicago public school system on the South Side, and she was not up for relocating from there up to Waukegan and try and find another teaching job. She was educator and everything. That was one factor. The second factor was that I had an offer to go back. So I was licensed. I had taken the bar exam in both states of Indiana and Illinois and passed them both. And the county prosecutor in Lake County, Indiana, discovered that I had that I was available. I was from Indiana. Apparently, some hometown boys, some hometown friends of mine, he became aware of me, and I received a phone call, and he invited me to come to dinner. I did, and he made me an offer to come back to Indiana. And that was a desire that I had to eventually relocate back there. And then he offered me a little bit more money. Then he offered me a major felony courtroom. So it's kind of difficult for me to resist those three factors: mom, the courtroom, and as well as the more money. And so those are the three factors that caused me to relocate. And plus I was young and everything. And I wasn't looking 5 or 10 years down the road. And as a result, that's how I ended up relocating back to Indiana.
Well, tell us about your son. He's affiliated with your firm, but not originally, right?
I don't know. I have two children. I've got a daughter and a son. My daughter is the oldest. My daughter, undergrad, she went to Notre Dame. And then from Notre Dame, she went to med school at University of Iowa. And then she did a residency in New York, in Manhattan, New York. And then she, got engaged, got married. And after residency, they relocated to Carolina. So she's a medical doctor in Carolina now, in Charlotte area. My son, who was like 5 years her junior at that point in time, he was an athlete, again, like I was, except he was better than I was. And he went to Drake University. And I thought he was going to go to Northwestern. Matter of fact, that was the last school I took him to for a visit, because he was a multi-athlete in terms of soccer, football, basketball, baseball, but he loved football and basketball. And Northwestern was recruiting him for football, but he loved basketball better. But he wanted to play both. And there's a couple other Big Ten schools, and the Big Ten schools were saying that you can't play both here, you got to play just one. And so Northwestern was the one that was said that if you come here on your scholarship, football scholarship, we'll allow you to play basketball. So therefore, that's where the interest went. So that's where I thought he was going to go, right? And then he got this call from this coach from Drake University, and who said to him, hey, you about a year ago, you committed that you're going to come at least visit us and everything. And his son didn't want to go. So I told him, I said, at this point in time, you're getting to be a young man and your word is your bond. So if you make a commitment, you got to fulfill that. It doesn't say you have to go there. Your commitment was that you go visit the school. So at least go visit the school. And finally said, okay, Dad. So he went to visit the school. And then I picked him up at the airport on a Sunday night. And around 10:30, 11 o'clock. And the first thing he said when he got out the airport, he said, Dad, that's where I want to go. And that was it. So that's how he ended up going to Drake. And then he went to Drake, graduated. Matter of fact, he was Mr. Everything there in terms of captain, MVP on the team, that kind of stuff. And then afterwards, he thought he might get drafted, but he didn't get drafted. Instead, he ended up playing professional, semi-pro ball with a Iowa semi-professional team. And he played there for about 2.5, 3 years. And then there was another pro team that was starting in Indiana. And Indiana talked to him, and they convinced him to come with them. And reluctantly, he left the Iowa team for Indiana. And when he went to the Indiana team, it folded. It folded. And so as a result of that, he indicated, he said, Dad, I want to do something else. And I said, well, what do you want to do? He said, I realize I'm not going to get an NBA contract now, so I want to do something else. I said, what is it? He said, I want to go to law school. And I was happy. I was happy. Deep down inside, that's what I wanted him to do anyway. But I didn't want to push myself on him. I wanted to be his choice. And that was the choice he made. He went to IU down in Indianapolis. He ended up being the class president of the law school. He was representing the law school. And they had different meetings and everything. Got a lot of mentors, everything. My partner was one of his mentors. My partner was the only African American that was on the state Supreme Court, and so my partner was one of his mentors. He had 2 other members on the Indiana Supreme Court that was mentors of his. One of the Supreme Court judges had season tickets to the Pacers game, so whenever he didn't go to a Pacers game, he'd call my son and give the tickets to him and everything. But in any event, I thought my son's chances for a good, solid career might be in Indianapolis. So I suggested to him that he should stay in Indianapolis when he graduated. But instead, he came to Lake County, got together with the prosecutor's office, prosecuted for about 3 or 4 years. And after that, he said, Dad, I want to come in private practice with you. And as a result, he's in the office with me now, and he's been there now for the last three years or so, maybe 4. So yeah, we're practicing together now. That was a long story. I didn't make short.
Talk about you now. You mentioned that you had run for mayor at one time.
Yep, I did. I tell you what happened. Mayor was something that developed on my mind while I was practicing law in East Chicago in Indiana. I was with the county prosecutor's office, and then what happened was some community people came to me and they wanted me to run for state senate. And I said, well, I was kind of looking at the mayor's thing and everything, but they convinced me to do that. So I did run for the state senate, and I won that election. It was a gentleman that by the name of Thurm Faree, was a current sitting state senator at that time. And matter of fact, an African-American never had that position before. So when I ran against him, I did, I ended up winning, and I was the first African-American to be a state senator. And then after about 6 years, the local city judge died. And so she had about 2 years on her term. And then the governor came to me and asked would I be interested in being appointed to serve out the balance of her term. And my thinking was maybe not, and all that. And then when I thought about what my ambition at that time, objective at that time was for the mayorship, I said, well, look, if I take the position, at least I'll be close to home and I get a chance to be in touch with the community and run for mayor at some point. So I took the position. And I served for 2 years out as judge. And then I ran again for re-election as judge. And then I won that election. And then after about 3 or 4 years before my term ran out, that's when the mayor position came available. And then I resigned from the judge position to run for mayor. And at that time in Indiana, if you're in a judicial office position, you can't run for another position without resigning. So you had to resign and everything. And so I had to resign. And I ran against the mayor who had been sitting mayor for like 30 plus years. And he was a legend in his own name. His name was Robert A. Pastrick. And people just referred to him as Bob Pastrick. Some referred to him as Hollywood Bob. But he had been around a long time. And his years goes all the way back to John Kennedy. They were friends. And he was on the National Democratic Party and everything. And so he was unbeatable. At least that's what people were saying. He was unbeatable. And then and I had this slogan, and believe it or not, and most people don't know this, I had a fundraiser, a local minister who was I think he's a field manager for Operation Push in Chicago. And he had a church in East Chicago, and he commuted and everything. And so he helped put together a fundraiser for me at the banquet hall of his church. And my guest speaker for the fundraiser was Jesse Jackson Jr. At that time, Jesse Jackson Jr. was a Congressman, Jesse Jackson Jr. And we met before the event started. We were meeting the pastors, and we were talking about my campaign. And he asked me, he said, well, what's your slogan? I said, my slogan is going to be, get this, yes, we can. He said, that's a strange slogan. I said, well, it's strange because I'm running against an incumbent who's been around for 30 plus years. He's a legend. And people seem to think I can't beat him. And the first thing they ask me is, can you win? So I'm answering them before they even ask the question, yes, we can. So that's when that slogan started. And what happened was Jesse Jackson Jr. liked the slogan after explaining. And so at that point, that's when Barack Obama decided that he's going to run for U.S. Senator out of Illinois. Then I go to Chicago one day and I see a big billboard with Jesse Jackson Jr. and Barack Obama on it. And it says, yes, we can. I said, boy, he got my slogan. So he took my slogan and everything. And people said, yeah. I said, well, I've got my documentation showing the date and time when I created that. And so you can see it predates any time Obama ran for U.S. Senator as well as for the presidency. So that's how the slogan got started with me. I'm not even certain Obama knows where the slogan came from because I'm not certain Jesse Jackson Jr. revealed to him where he got it from. But anyway, he got it from me.
Time is really flying, and we just got a few minutes left, but I'd like for you just to touch on, oh, by the way, I'm sorry, did you know Richard Hatcher?
Yes, very much. He was one of my mentors and political mentors. When I was in college, my senior year, when they had the African American and Black National Convention in Gary, Hatcher was the one that implemented that. And that's when I first met Jesse Jackson Sr. And going to that convention is what motivated me to get involved with politics and everything. And Hatcher became one of my mentors and everything. He became one of my mentors when I ran for state senator. He was my mentor when I was a judge. And he was my mentor when I decided to run for mayor in East Chicago. And I didn't win the mayorship. Mm-hmm. But what happened was afterwards, after I didn't win the mayorship, I just practiced for a few years. And then my position became available once again. And that's when some community people came to me and said, well, why don't you do it again? And I did. So I'm back in the Senate now as a state senator. And in Indiana, we're considered like part-time legislators, which allows us, if we're lawyers, to continue to practice and everything. But that's where I am. So yeah, Dick Hatcher, he just passed last year. I know his family real well. He has 3 daughters, and all of them are lawyers. Now, one of his daughters is a state rep. She just ran 2 years ago. And she took an individual by the name of Charlie Brown's position in the House of Representatives. And the other 2 daughters, one is a teacher, instructor at John Marshall Law School there in Chicago, the one I used to go to, one I went to rather, and they're tied in with the University of Illinois now. And the other one is, the other one's married, but I'm not certain as to whether or not she's in Chicago or in Texas. At one point, I got word that there was one in Texas teaching. So, but yeah, but I know Mr. Hatcher, Mayor Hatcher, very well.
How many years that he served? He must have been quite a few years. But...
As a senator, you mean? Or pardon?
He's the mayor of Gary, right?
Yeah, he was the mayor of Gary. He served 20 years.
Okay.
He served 20 years, and he was a catalyst. He was a catalyst or the motivational point for a lot of young African Americans, not just local wise in the region. By the region, I mean in Gary, East Chicago, Hammond area, but in the nation, because when he had the convention, a lot of people from throughout the entire country came to that convention, and that. I think, and if you were to do your research, you'll find out that after that convention, you start looking throughout the entire country, you saw a lot of African-American mayors and councilmen popping up throughout the entire country. And they were people and it was a byproduct of the Black convention that the Hill and Gary supported and initiated by Mayor Richard Gordon Hatcher out of Gary, Indiana.
Wow. One thing I'd like to mention, just a couple of landmark decisions, and just want you to touch on them. We don't have time to go into detail, but one of these days we'll go. One is in California, the Ellen Bakke case. Well, that's 1978 too. Also, so
long time. Yeah.
But U.S. Supreme Court decision, they declared affirmative action constitutional, but invalidated the use of racial quotas. In other words, they said, admit Bakke, but you cannot use racial quotas. I couldn't understand.
Yeah, well, it was kind of confusing and surprising, really, because that was when we think of Bakke, especially lawyers, African American lawyers, we think of reverse discrimination. Okay. That was the basis he was using. He was saying that he was being discriminated.
He was an engineer, right?
Yep, and he was being discriminated against in favor of blacks for going to law school and everything. And so that's why the slogan "reverse discrimination" came in. Edward Bakke was his name. And apparently, the quota thing was a word that was implemented mostly by whites, and they were trying to show the courts that the quotas were illegal, but the law schools were saying that it's not really a quota. We're just trying to be open, fair at university about admitting students, and so we're not calling it a quota, but they're calling it a quota. Pope was in opposition to it, and so Bakke was pushing really hard on that word quota. And the Supreme Court bought it. They bought it and the rule for him at that point in time. So that caused a lot of the universities to back up their recruiting efforts concerning minorities and their various universities throughout the country, not just the state of California, but entire country.
You know, Brown versus Board of Education, matter of fact, Linda Brown just passed at 76 years old. This was one of the few times that the Supreme Court voted 9-0 in favor of
there's always that, or we could
Brown versus Board. Now, but the only thing to catch to it is that they say you proceed to go with all deliberate speed. Now, I never could understand what all deliberate speed means.
Thank you.
But you know,
have a great
it's interesting.
I only got 1 minute to go, so.
Well, all deliberate speed was wording that was carefully chosen by the justices because they knew if they said right away, immediately, then they would get a big, strong resistance. And all deliberate speed, that means that the various states, counties can take their time about complying, and therefore eventually a period of time would pass by and it'd be easier for the effects of the ruling would take place. So that's why it said with all deliberate speed. Okay. Well, that's one of the reasons, but that's pretty much the reason why. And there's a book that spoke as exclusively on Brown Board of Education. And I wish I had it in front of me so I can give you the title so you can read it and everything. But Brown versus Board of Education was a case that transcend any and everything that we as human beings do and participate, because it dealt with social area. I mean, driving on highways with everything, you had to be equal treatment, have no discriminatory effect, whether it's your job, whether it's going to a restaurant, whether it's a social event, I mean, whatever. That was the biggest catalyst of everything.
Thank you very much for taking time from your very busy schedule from your state of Indiana Assembly.
State of Indiana, my second district, and I'm very happy to be in the position I'm in right now. And I feel that I'm in a position where I can do my small share of what I can to protect minority rights when it comes to equal rights in this country, particularly starting in the state of Indiana, because we need it. Indiana's a conservative state. As you know, Indiana's a state that Mike Pence is from.
Right.
So don't forget that.
I'm going to contact you soon again. This is real. You made my day. And I really appreciate it.
You made mine. It's been a while, boy. It's good to see you, good to talk to you, and you look fantastic. You know that? Like what's that comedian that's on TV? What's his name? He said, "You look marvelous." Well, you look marvelous.
Thank you very much. And tell the wife I said hello, and maybe one of these days we'll meet her. And
We'll do. Look forward.
she has a great career.
Thank you. You take care now, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Lake County Community Forum. My name is Dr. Wadell Brooks Sr., your host.